If your scarf looks like it's trying to escape to the left, or your washcloth is giving trapezoid vibes, it's not just you. This is the edge war no one warned us about. Be honest, how many rectangles have you frogged that ended up as accidental shawls? Drop your shape-shifting stitch stories in the comments. Hey crochet friends, I'm Mo, your crochet companion. Today we're fixing that sneaky edge situation. You'll learn how to spot the stitch that you should be working into, how turning chains work, and when to skip them, and the trick I use to keep my rows actually straight without counting every dang time. Crochet edges get crooked when you accidentally add or drop a stitch at the beginning or the end of the row. So as you can see from my little swatch here, we've got a fun little shape. Let me back up here a little bit so you can see. It's a fun little shape, right? So this is actually a single crochet, right? And then I have one that I did with a double crochet. So there's two common things that happen with those. All right, so I'm going to actually show you in a physical sense and how I'm doing this. So as you can see, we have your stitch 1 and you have your last stitch. When most people turn on a single crochet, they do this, and sometimes they'll skip that first one because they forget that they're doing a single crochet and not a double crochet. Because in a double crochet, you actually chain 2, and that counts as your first double crochet. You skip this first stitch and you go into that second spot because this is now your first double crochet. So sometimes I see people do that when they are turning their work with a single crochet. They will actually skip that first and go right into that next one. So with single crochet, you want to make sure that you are fully putting a stitch in every single spot. And I look at it, you can look at it from the bottom and from the top as well. So if you're looking, from the side. If you're looking at it from the side, I kind of look for this little indentation. Kind of almost looks like a dimple, right? So that's where you're going to insert your hook when you're doing your single crochet. And then if you're looking at the top, you're looking at that braid. So every braid, you want to make sure that you're stitching into every single braid. Now, this is the other spot that most people, when they're beginning, they kind of miss. Let me get to the end of the stitch, or the end of the row here. That last stitch, it's the one that always tries to play hide and go seek. So let's go into that last one. So this is often the one that people skip when it's the single crochet as well as the double crochet. But it's a little more obvious which one you need to stitch into when you're doing a single crochet. Now the double crochet, and you'll see this one. You see how I've got a nice even number. Let me go on this side. And then right here, this is the one that was missed. And it's often missed because it's that chain. Remember, that chain of 2 is what we consider the first double crochet. So let me show you how that works out. Let me show you by doing a row of double crochets. We're going to chain of 2. Now remember, the double crochet, we skip this one, that first dimple, we skip that because our chain of 2 is considered our first double crochet. So we're going to do our double crochets all the way to the end. All the way to the end. Okay, and then we want to make sure that we don't miss that last one. So we're going to double check. Yep, We got the braid, we got the dimple, so we need to insert our hook. Now we're going to go back the other way, and this is the one that we often miss, right? Is at the end of a row of double crochets, because we missed that chain of 2 at the end of the row. All right, almost there. All right, so that chain of 2, so this is the one that is most common missed at the end of the row. We're going to actually insert our hook into that chain. So it has to be at the top of that chain. We're going to insert our hook into that top of the chain, and that counts as our last spot where we need to do our last stitch. Now there's another one that I was going to show you here with the starting chain. So a lot of people use the starting chain to start their work. I don't know if you can see it, but let's see if you can spot it. If you are saying that you missed a chain, you are right. So quite often, sometimes those chains, when you're doing that starting chain, you miss one of those chains. So now you can see that you have a little bit of a gap. But the most common occurrence is missing that first stitch with the, adding an extra stitch for the double crochet because you are crocheting in that first space. And I mean by this, that first space, so you're doing that chain of 2 and you miss that first one. I mean, with the double crochet, most people, they actually put into that instead of going to the second space. And then the reverse is true with the single crochet. You miss that first stitch because you forget which one's what. The single crochet, you are going into the first stitch. The double crochet, you're going into the second stitch. And this is also true for any longer stitch. So you would go into the second stitch if you're doing a half double crochet. You're going to go into the second stitch if you're doing a treble or double treble or double treble triple. I don't even know if that one exists, but you get the point. So there's that. And as you can see, this isn't about new stitches. It's about clean stitches. We're using a single crochet, the half double crochet to start. We're not going to go full on bobble mode yet, okay? Are you still with me? That is awesome. This next trick is what finally stopped me from frogging row after row just to find the dang edge. You're going to want to steal this one. So as you can see, I have these wonderful stitch markers right here, right? This is going to be your best friend. So when you turn your work, so you're going to do the chain 1, turn your work, insert your single crochet into that first stitch, and immediately you're going to put a stitch marker right in there. I would recommend doing this until you really get good at identifying which stitch is what. Then you should be able to just go on down the road. Remember, you're looking for every little dimple and every little braid. You're going to stick your hook in each one. And then when you get to that end, you're going to insert into that first chain 3. Or chain 2, excuse me. We did a double crochet, so it's going to be a chain 2 at the very top of that chain 2. That way you have a much cleaner edge. As you can see, stitch markers are like your crochet GPS. You drop one in that first stitch so you don't accidentally stitch into your turning chain like it owes you money. As you can see, we want to do it in the braid, not in the chain, the turning chain itself, okay? All right, so here's the tea. Sometimes the turning chain counts as a stitch and sometimes it doesn't. Depends on your pattern and your mood. So you really want to pay attention to the actual pattern because there are some patterns that they don't use the turning chain as their first stitch. Sometimes they will use the first double crochet and they will actually double crochet into that. So a good example is that I have a butterfly motif that I did, and in order to get the fatness of the wing, I actually did a double crochet into that first stitch. Now keep in mind, when you're doing your turning chain, normally you do a chain 1 for single crochet, chain 2 for double crochet, and chain 3 for treble, chain 4 for a double treble. There are times when I won't actually use a chain for single crochet. If I'm working on a clothing piece and I don't want it to have that little, so you see when you do a turning chain, it kind of has that little, I don't know what to call it. It's a little ridge or a little bump right there. If I don't want that on my clothing, I will actually turn my work on a single crochet and just insert right into that first one. So that's another consideration. And if you're doing that, you really do need to make sure that you are putting a stitch marker in that first one so that you are not losing that stitch, because when you don't do the turning chain, you're more likely to lose that stitch than if you don't. If you do the turning chain. So let's take a look at that. So I'm going to go to the end and then I'm going to go back so you can see kind of how it changes. So I'm going to finish that one right there. I'm going to take my stitch marker out. Actually, this one we're not going to chain 1 to turn. We're just going to turn our work, insert our hook into that, put our stitch marker in there, then we're going to go to the end, and I'll show you kind of the difference. You might not be able to see too much of a difference just from one row, but when you are doing an article of clothing, having that not doing that chain 1 before you turn is really quite beneficial, because you won't have that little lip at the end. So how you see how it kind of blends in a little bit more? Can't really see too much, but can you see the difference between the turning chain here and the turning chain here? Well, the lack of turning chain here. So now it's not as bumpy up here as it was down here. Now I have a bonus tip for you, so you can actually even lightly block your piece if the yarn allows it. That'll tell those edges you live here now. So when I say blocking, my personal way of blocking is that I have a steam iron. I give it a shot of some water, let it, I spread it out, kind of give it a little bit of a yank, and then it just kind of let it dry, and it just lays nicely like that. It is very crucial for you to block your work after you're done with the piece, because that's what gives it that professional edge. So like you see right here, it doesn't look very nice, right? But it would once I blocked it. So, and I could kind of, manipulate it in the edges and pull it out so that it evens the sides out a little bit. Okay, so if this helped you conquer your rebellious edges, give it a like and hit subscribe so you don't miss what we're stitching up next. Next up, we're going to talk about how to read your stitches like a pattern, even if you lost the pattern. Yes, you can totally do that. Until next time, straighten those edges with sass and happy crocheting.